Hi, my name's Claire and this is my story so far. My childhood was a very enjoyable one. I was born and grew up in Dalby in Queensland, not far from here. I'm the middle child, which makes life as a child very interesting. We loved being around each other as kids. I enjoyed sports and animals and all things people. My parents and us as kids, we loved hanging out with other families and people, particularly our age. We really enjoyed that. Faith was a huge part of my childhood. My grandparents are pastors and have been for most of their life. So we grew up in church, around church. We were at church every Sunday, both services, as Dalby had 2 services back in the day, morning and night. So, and every prayer meeting and worship team meeting and all that sort of stuff. So we had a lot to do with church. I remember being at the nighttime service in Dalby, and I had this moment while they were doing praise and worship, and I felt God's presence probably for the first time, tangible presence. And I realised from that point on that my relationship with God is different to somebody else's, and it will be different, and that it was the beginning of my journey, my faith journey. And when I got to grade 10, I wanted to leave school, wanted to go and work, do jillarooing out in Northern Territory somewhere, which nobody wanted me to do. My parents, my grandparents, they just knew the environment that it was, and I was completely oblivious to that. So when they realised how keen I was to leave school and go to work, there was an opportunity that came about to work at the Border Rivers Christian College in Gundawindi as the administration officer. Brand new school, 19 kids, prep to grade 6. A little bit scary. I didn't actually realise until I'd started the job how big it was going to be. There were 5 staff and that was it. So it was very full on, especially being like my first full-time job leaving home. Like, that was a massive thing for me. In the same sense as doing youth, I was also involved in the worship team. I was involved in sometimes the kids ministry. I was doing a lot in that year, as well as finishing my studies, my grade 12 certificate I did by distance education, which was scary, and it definitely ended in burnout. I had a few people say to me, well, you know, God's blessed you with the gift of being able to play drums or being able to sing, so why aren't you doing it? And that really cut deep for me, because it was a matter of it was a bitter seed. I became bitter towards the person as well as towards the ministry. So I think within all of that was probably one of the bigger challenges as I became a bit older in my journey with God, and it became a matter of, well, why if there's the people of God, why do people who are in ministry in the church have to be that mean, they're not caring for the person. It's more about the ministry, where if I said, look, I'm just tired, like, we don't have to have drums today because we had piano, guitar, bass, like we had everything else. Is there any chance that I could just have a minute? And they'd be like, I'd be met with that, well, you know, if you have the gift, why aren't you doing it? I attended a youth camp, Downpour, in 2015 with my cohort of youth kids, and that's where I met Cameron, my husband, who at the time I did not think was that great. I did not have a good experience the first time meeting him, mainly because I can be judgmental sometimes. But I remember we were sitting in a circle, the leaders, and we were praying before the camp, and I had my head down and eyes closed. And you know, sometimes when you're a single gal at a youth camp, you just open your eyes and have a little look around the room. And I was met with Cameron's eyes also doing this at me. So I freaked out. I was like, oh no, he's looking at me. When we were at the camp, he decided to tell me they didn't have his phone, so he wrote notes in the from the preaching on my phone and put in my contacts his name, his phone number, his email address, just 2 email addresses, his personal and his chappy email address, so that I would have every possible way of contacting him if I wanted to. Early married life with Cameron was interesting, especially with us, you know, Cameron being a lot older and I'm being younger. I hadn't really had much experience outside of my family, outside of my very small world in Gundwindi. So we found that I thought I knew a lot more than I did, and Cameron was definitely the person to let me know that I did not know very much. We became pregnant with our first baby, which ended in a miscarriage at 9 weeks. It's the baby's name. We didn't know it was a boy or girl. We called it Jordan. Ended up being, we had to have medical intervention and things like that. So it was a bit scary, definitely. You never think it's going to happen to you until it does. And then you understand. I'd never experienced loss before. I have both sets of grandparents. I have no one in my family. The last person to pass away was my great-granddad, and he was 90, and that's when I was 9 years old. So I think not experiencing any loss prior to that, I didn't know how to continue to communicate with God the same, because, you know, you put so much trust in it. You find out you're pregnant, you start praying for the baby, and you start, you know, like, it's a mother's instinct to immediately be like, okay, well, you know, let's pray for this child we have prayed, you know, that sort of stuff. And when it's the joys and all your imagination then gets literally crumbles around you or gets taken away, it's a matter of, well, how am I going to view God now? How am I going to talk to God when the one person I felt like I should be trusting, I don't feel like I can because of the hurt that was caused by the miscarriage or by the loss. Then we found out we were pregnant again, and it made me quite an anxious person, especially around the beginning, because you're not supposed to tell anybody, you know, just in case something happens. And I'm like, we'd already experienced that, and I was really struggling going through things like that alone. We did have some complications in the beginning that really frightened me, but then we found out that everything was fine, and, you know, like, we didn't have to worry, and we're just going to take it day by day and see how it goes. And, well, with Manny on the scene, we decided that we were ready for another baby. I decided that I was ready for another baby. Manny was still quite young, which was a little bit scary, but I didn't think about that at the time. We just enjoyed Manny so much that I thought, why don't we have another one? So we found out that we were pregnant, which we were really, really excited about. And we thought with the complications we had earlier with Manny's pregnancy that we would not go and see the doctor straight away, which was fine. So we waited till about 10, 12 weeks before we even went and made an appointment with the doctor. And then, you know, you have your ultrasounds and everything looked great. We're 12, 14 weeks along. So we started telling people, which was really exciting. And I was probably most engulfed in the fact that I was like, is it going to be a boy or a girl? I was so excited if it was going to be a girl. We then had our 20-week morphology scan, which Cameron is against finding out the gender, but I said it was my body and I'll find out if I want to or not. So by doing everything, they check the brain and check all the kidneys and how long everything is and how everything's progressing. And then I was like, oh, you know, could you tell us the gender? And the sonographer said, she's like, you'll be painting the baby's room pink. And obviously I burst into tears. I was like, this is amazing, that's so cool. Like, Maddie's gonna have a sister and we're gonna have a daughter. And it was just amazing. It was a moment of the warm, fuzzy feelings. And then her next words was, oh, now it's time to check her heart. She's in a good position. And she said, oh no, something's not right. something's really not right. So then we were left feeling very anxious and scared, and left the ultrasound room, and the first person I called was my mum, and I said, "Mum, they're saying that something's wrong with her heart." And I was like, "Well, she's a girl," at the same time, so that's amazing. And then the next words were, "There's something wrong with her heart," and everyone's like, "Well, what?" I said, "I don't know." So we don't know, and no one can tell us. We have another appointment with the doctor at 4:00 this afternoon. Can you just pray? We just called people to pray. We got to the appointment that afternoon, and before we even sat down in the room, I was, "Can you please tell us what's wrong? Do you know? Is there any indication at all? Can you just tell us?" And the doctor said, "I can't. Unfortunately, I still cannot tell you. Something is definitely very wrong." He said, "I'm not a professional. I'll have to refer you to a different hospital in a different location to see a cardiologist, and they have a better ultrasound machine where they can see more." He said, "I've already got in contact with them. I've already booked you an appointment for 2 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks time. You will need to attend that appointment." And so we left still not knowing what was going on, what to do, which really is scary when everything within you is so bittersweet, is you're thinking, what you don't know. We don't know. I have no idea. And how would I continue to just keep living for the next 2 or 3 weeks, just like, it's okay, we don't know, but that's fine. Like, I was not like that. We didn't really tell anybody what was going on because we didn't know. So if we start to tell people, I want to give people all the information, not just we don't know what's going on, but there's something going on. So we attended our appointment at the Brisbane Mater Mothers Hospital 3 weeks later, so I was 23 weeks, and that's where we found out Abigail's diagnosis. We had the ultrasound, and then they didn't tell us anything in the room. They brought the cardiologist in, they were whispering and hush-hushing and that sort of stuff, and I immediately just had this terrible sick feeling that it's not good. So they took us into this little room down the hallway. I sat down, I looked Cameron in the eye, and he was very optimistic, as Cameron always is. And he said that, "It's okay, we're going to be okay." I said, "No, we're going to be okay." But I said, "Cam, they don't sit you down in this room unless something's really wrong."
Welcome, Claire.
Thank you.
I think it's always a very brave thing to get up here and share your story, and we've loved hearing the last 10 minutes or so. Let's pick up exactly where we left off. You and Cam are now sitting in this room with a specialist in front of you, the small little room, waiting for a diagnosis. What does the doctor say?
Yes, so the doctor sits us down and looks us in the eyes and just is like, "Look, so I can't, it's not good." He just said to us, he said it's a condition called hyperplastic left heart syndrome, where the left side of your daughter's heart has not formed correctly. And at this point, he's got a piece of paper and he's drawing everything and he's trying to figure out, he's drawing us a big diagram. He's like, "So this is what it looks like." There's a picture on the screen. So obviously on one side you can see there's a left and a right chamber and everything's good. And then on the other heart there's just a big nothing. He said it's all a right side chamber, which is quite scary, sitting there listening to someone tell you that. I remember not really looking at the cardiologist in the eyes. I was like, maybe if I'm not looking at him, it's not happening to me. It's not happening to us. So from there, he just was like, "Look," he said, "I'm going to have to go through this a little bit quickly." And he's like, "Look, here are your options. So you've got three options. The first one was," he said, "termination. Second one was surgery, and the third was palliative care or comfort care. So obviously for Cameron and I, termination was never an option. We didn't even discuss it. So then we went to, he was talking about the heart surgery, so there's 3 open heart surgeries before she's 4, or there's palliative care. And he said, even if you guys chose surgery, he said, I can't guarantee quality or quantity of life. He said, you'll have a chronically ill child, a simple flu could kill her. And he said, I couldn't even tell you how long she'd live for. He said, so with the surgeries like what I've told you, they have very long names, but he said that the right or left side valve is a high pressure valve, and he said so would be trying to create something out of nothing. And he said what could happen is that she could have a heart attack or something like that. She'll never be able to be running around with Manny, or like even just a simple walking upstairs, she'll really struggle to do. So walking away from that for Cameron and I was quite daunting. We saw many people that day. I remember seeing the palliative care team. I remember seeing the guy who talks to you about termination, and then we had the cardiologists, and it was a very full-on moment for us, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I think the months of uncertainty, or the weeks of uncertainty until that point, and then to hear that news delivered, just a huge weight on your shoulders. And those conversations with Cam, who of course is here as well. Cam, we honour you too, mate. Tough journey for both of you. The tough conversations to have, to knowing that you weren't going to take the first option, but 2 very weighty choices. How did you guys have those conversations, and where did you eventually land?
So we had our ACC state conference. Literally, we got out of that appointment. We got Manny from Tegan and June, and then we got in the car and drove to state conference. And I just remember sitting in the car just crying, and I didn't even have words to say. I was like, how do I speak to my husband about the decision of our daughter's life? We literally hold life or death in our hands, and I didn't want to be met with if Cameron had a different idea to me. That was my worst fear, is that I was going to talk to him and I would be like, I'm thinking comfort care, and he's like, no, I'm thinking surgery. So I don't think we really talked about it for a little while, especially on that trip to where we were staying, to the accommodation. And I think even after the first couple of days at conference, we were just slowly telling people. We were very aware of who we were telling, and just asking them to pray and to pray for us. I specifically remember the cardiologist saying to us, he said, this decision is no one else's but yours. It's a decision that you will live with for the rest of your life. So it's something that you need to be comfortable with. He said, you cannot regret this decision. And I think in the end of it, eventually within that week, we'd sort of come to within the little tiny times that we talked about it, I got that Cameron was thinking that we weren't thinking for surgery, that we were going to believe for a miracle. And even if God didn't perform that miracle, that we were still going to be okay. And I remember thinking, I would rather have this baby and her never know the pain of a needle or recovering from surgery than for her to just have the comfort and love of her family, and that's all she would need, rather than turning and being like, there's so much pain when it comes to surgery, and they're tiny little bodies, and I couldn't bear the thought of that. So I think that's when we came to the decision of, okay, and we had another scan at 32 weeks. The cardiologist just wanted to check and see, because he's like, look, sometimes things can change within that time. So when we had that scan at 32 weeks and nothing had changed, we just knew that the decision we'd made was a good one. And the cardiologist, he never said anything before that to us, but he said after he'd heard our decision, he just looked us in the eye. I think he grabbed my hand and he said, if this was my daughter, he said, I would be making the same decision as you are now. And that was probably a God moment for me to be like, okay, I think we've made the right decision. There's always what ifs, but we were very comfortable with that.
Wow, huge decision. So you and Cam made the decision for palliative care or for comfort care, I think. Did you call it? Yeah. And so how did your pregnancy go then, knowing what you guys knew about Abby's life expectancy and what that could look like? How did your pregnancy go? It would have been very different, I'd imagine, to Manny's pregnancy. How was that journey for you guys, I guess, from that point to delivery?
Pregnancy was pretty normal. She was very safe on the inside. The placenta was doing the hard work for her, which was comforting to know that there wasn't anything I could physically do to make her more comfortable. All I could do was just keep her on the inside. That's all I had to do, which is pretty easy. So it was good at that point. We were definitely met with some interesting opposition within the church as to why, we weren't up at every healing altar call or that sort of stuff. I know that's when we were careful who we were telling and then who they were telling, and it sort of just slowly leaked out through the church, which was fine because it was easier for us not to be telling everyone, because you'd be like, oh, how's the baby going? How are you feeling? Yeah, it's good. Well, how's the baby? And you're like, well, can't lie to you, so I'm going to tell you. And then, well, why aren't you choosing surgery? Well, where's your faith? I was like, for me, I feel like my faith is being stretched more in the fact that we're believing for a miracle, and that's what we need to do. So there was definitely some opposition in that. So we sort of probably kept to ourselves a lot within that time, and we definitely had lots of big conversations with family. I know I've spoken a lot to June about just everything, mum to mum, and just being like, how are we going to do this? How am I going to do this? And just getting encouragement that way. I know that I had people wanting to throw us baby showers and things, and I had to decline because I'm like, I can't take your stuff. I can't take your gifts because I don't want to be left with a room full of stuff that she's never going to use. If you want to bless us, cook us a meal or something like that. It definitely, you watch people step back from you when you decline things like that. It was interesting. We definitely had people that were there to support us, but at the same time, we thought we had a large group of friends, but it was interesting to see who sort of fell away and weren't really on the scene anymore, whether they didn't know what to say, or I don't know, maybe I offended them by something that I said, or, at the same time as I was comforting and acknowledging that what I was telling them was hard, but it was actually us that was going through it, not them. So I found that really interesting when people would go like, oh, that's really difficult. And then they would be processing and be like, oh, okay, you're processing my story. Okay, then you'd have to create space for them. So yeah, we were very aware of who we were telling and that sort of stuff. So.
I think it is an interesting dynamic when you're going through the season yourself. Often you do seem to carry other people around you. And this is when you guys are still out at Gundawindi.
Yep.
And so that sort of community out there that you guys have been a part of for a while,
yep.
Obviously finding those challenges within that community. I'd love to introduce everybody to Abby. Can we do that?
Yeah.
So Abby was born on the 22nd of January 2020. We've got that beautiful picture there, and she is a stunner. Talk to us about, I can imagine that would be a day full of mixed emotions, bittersweet, and just unlike, I think, any other day that you and Cameron and the whole family have experienced before. Talk to us a little bit about her, I guess, her first days and then her last days with us.
Yeah, so we had Abigail in Gundawindi, which was a huge blessing for us. We didn't want to be anywhere but home. So the medical team created space for us to do that, which was amazing. We wouldn't have done it any other way. So we were induced on the 22nd, and she came out into the world happy and healthy, which we were so thankful for, because they didn't know. We weren't prepared for whether she was going to be sick or whether she was going to be happy and healthy, because we didn't know the life expectancy, whether it was going to be 9 hours, 9 days, 9 months. He said, honestly, I've seen babies live for up to 3 months and then they pass away. So we were really unsure of how it was all going to pan out. So when we were met with this healthy baby girl, we were so ecstatic. We were so excited. We just loved on her. I know there's a lot of mothers sitting in here, but the day you give birth, you're exhausted, but you're just filled with this adrenaline that you're like, I'm standing on top of the world right now. And that's, I'm sure, how Cameron and I felt, for sure. I remember Manny walking in and seeing the baby for the first time, and he just wanted to poke her eyes out. But he was just amazing, just wanted to touch her and cuddle her, and he was only 19 months old, so he could say Baba, and that was about it. So I know that was a big thing for me, that they got to meet, and they got to just, I don't think Manny remembers much or anything, but just that moment of they've met. Like, we did it. I've done that bit as a mum. They've got together and they've met each other. So we were discharged from the hospital the next day, because she was great and I was great, and we went home and we just were at home, which was great. Manny played and every day, and Tegan and June just took over Manny, which was so good. He was great, but he was a full-on at the same time. He was a crazy toddler, which I'm forever thankful for. And I know that for Cameron and I, it was a huge blessing. So we had time with Abby every day. We made sure that we tried to create memories with Manny and with us and with the family, and just having people come over and wanting to just touch her and love on her and meet her was huge for us. So we definitely struggled with when is this going to happen. I know that was probably one of the worst things, is every day wondering if this is going to be her last. So she was born on the 22nd of January and she lived 9 days. And as the days came, we got to a week, and I sort of had this feeling in my spirit that it's coming, it's going to happen. And I was extremely hopeful, and I prayed, and I'd be like, God, you can't take her away on Cameron's birthday. So Cameron's birthday is the 31st of January, and it got to the 30th of January that night, and I was trying to settle her, and we'd been told that she, all the things that we'd be doing to settle her probably wouldn't work, and it got to, I started feeding her at about 9:30. It got to 20 past 10 and she still wasn't settled. I remember June coming in and asking me if I was okay. I just said, I can't settle her. She's not, I think it's happening. And she went and got a stethoscope and just listened to her heart and was like, I think it's happening. We were given medication to keep her comfortable. We started with Panadol, and then the next one was morphine. So Panadol didn't work at all. So we did morphine, and it just made her sleep, which was really helpful. And the days leading up to the 9 days we were at home, I was sleeping in Abigail's room because it was a comfort to me to be near her, but I didn't want her to be in our bed. And I didn't really have space to have her in our bedroom, so I was sleeping in there. But then when it came to that night, June suggested, she said, I think you should take her to bed with you and Cam. And I remember just having her in the bed with us was so comforting. Definitely knowing that I had Cameron next to me as well was really grounding and helpful. So I woke up the next morning, and it was Cameron's birthday, and I didn't know how to function, that's for sure. I remember we were met at the door with my grandparents. My nan had baked Cameron a fruit cake because that's his favourite cake. And we met with presents, and the next thing how's Abigail going? And having to stand there and tell people she's actually passing away was probably one of the hardest things I had to do. So then we just stayed at home. We watched movies for the day. We just were spending time with her. She was on me, and then she was on Cameron, and at 11:26 she took her last breath, laying on Cam. Sorry. I just remember Cameron gasped and sort of went, I think she's gone. And Tegan was there, and she got the stethoscope and said, yeah, I can hear she's going. So I picked her up and put her on my chest, and I don't really remember much after that. I just remember sitting on the couch and just holding her body, and just, what do? You just don't know. I just sat with Cam, and I didn't leave her side. We had people to call, and they came and they took her handprints and her feet prints and a lock of her hair, and left us with a lot of memories of her. And we had a funeral home lady come. Her name was Lisa, and she's a special kind of woman, that's for sure. She was prepared. She had a baby car seat in her car. She had a crib ready. She just had everything sorted, which was incredible. So they ended up taking her to the funeral home, and because I didn't want to scare Manny, she drops, all the colours change in her face and everything. So I just remember being like, okay, we'll take her away, and we just went from there. Definitely was a very full-on moment for us. I remember from there just, trying to continue to trust God with everything was definitely hard. For me, it was the ultimate betrayal for me from God, as a moment of going, how do I continue to be as a person, be as a Christian, be as a woman in God, once a piece of me has literally been taken away. And it took a long time for us, and a lot of healing, definitely. So I know I can say today that even in the trial, we were never forsaken. We were never left alone. God was always with us. And with trials, even now, I know I can stand here and say that God will never leave you. God will always be with you. Even when you feel the loneliest, even when you feel the most broken, you're never alone. And in the trials, that's where God is.
And you had a real encounter with God, particularly around that thought when you were having a moment of pure frustration and crying out to God. Do you remember that scripture that he shared with you?
I can't particularly remember where it's from, but I've found lately with my children, who've been very unwell for a long time, and I was sitting talking to Cameron, and I said, I'm just worried I'll never be enough for them, that I won't be able to comfort them, I won't be able to be what they need. And Cameron's like, that's not what you need to worry about, because God's what you need. God's what they need. And you've been gifted our kids to comfort them, he said, and you are enough. And I remember going, and it was late at night, and I was up with Declan, and I was reading through the Bible, and it's said, well, I added no matter what, I'll be there. I'll be with you. And I remember just constantly going through that and being like, no matter what is going on, he'll be there, and I'm never alone. It's one of my biggest fears, is that I will be alone, and that to know that I will never be alone is huge for me, definitely.
Claire, I think we could all sit here and listen to your story for the rest of the day, but I'd love for you to have an opportunity to pray with some people, and we've honestly, thank you so much, and thank you, Cam, as well, for sharing your story, and for sharing Abby with us this morning. I think, I look at you and I see just such a beautiful example of someone who is faithful to God, even in the trial and even in the really hard times. You're just really solid in your faith. You're very real, which is refreshing and relatable. And, you just got this beautiful center in Jesus. And I know that even with talking with you when we caught up this week, you were sharing that, you'd love to encourage people along one last thought. Why don't you share that with us before you pray this morning?
I can't actually remember what it was.
It was that no matter what, you'll find the joy in every season.
Yes, actually, I wrote it down. That's
there you
why
go.
I had my phone. I was listening to the song Another in the Fire, and I was redoing some furniture that we have, and I was sitting there going, isn't it amazing how songs speak to you and lyrics speak to you? And at the end of the verses it says, I'll count the joy come every battle, because I know that's where you'll be. I know it's easier said than done, me sitting up here, and we never on the end of grief or on the end of missing our daughter Abigail, but especially moving here and having Declan, we've definitely made some big steps towards our healing journey, definitely. And the people here in this church that have definitely that have played a big part in our life, even living here, and encouraging us each day in the church. The messages, or just the, hey, I hope you're doing well this week, or the passing comments even in church, like, you're looking good today. Like, that's huge for me and huge for us. And I know that, like I was saying, it's easier said than done, me just sitting up here and being like, count it a joy to be in a trial, because that's where God will be. But it's the little things that keep me going each day, to think that when you are knee deep in a trial going, I don't know how I'm going to do this, you're not alone, and God's there to give you strength and to be with you. And you can go, when you think there's nobody else to turn to, you can go to God and be like, you know what, this is really hard and I need help. And he will be there to help you.
Awesome. And we'd love to pray along those lines. So just for privacy, if everyone could bow their heads and close their eyes. We're not going to prolong this, but we do want an opportunity for Claire to pray for you. So if you are feeling like you're in a trial right now, you're feeling like you're knee deep in that battle, and you just want someone who's been in a very real battle as well to pray with you, to encourage you, and to stand in Jesus with you, why don't you raise your hand and we'll see it, just so we know who we're praying for. And Claire would love to pray for you. Thank you. I can see that hand. I can see all those hands. Claire, why don't you pray for us this morning?
Jesus, loving Father, I thank you for this day. We thank you for the sunshine. We thank you for those little things that ground us in who you are as God. Jesus, I thank you that you see those people. You see those people who are in the trial, who are just coming out of the trial, or who are just about to start one. Father, I pray right now that you would hold their hand as they walk through this. Jesus, I pray that you would be holding their heart. As we sang this morning, that my soul needs a friend and my heart needs a surgeon. Father, I pray that you would be that person for us. Jesus, I pray that when we're in our quiet place and we take time to talk to you, that you would be there, that you would be speaking to us. Jesus, we thank you for everything that you've done for us. We thank you for the ultimate sacrifice. You sacrificed your son so that we can live. You sacrificed your son so that we can see our daughter in heaven. You sacrificed your son so that we can be and love and just enjoy this earth. Jesus, we thank you for that. And we pray that you would give us strength and humble us. Jesus, in your name, amen.
Beautiful. Why don't we thank Claire this morning? I think it is an incredible testimony of God's goodness and God's faithfulness, and really her and Cam being able to stand strong in their faith no matter what the trial. And I do pray that that's encouraged you this morning. You've probably mostly grabbed for your tissues, but that's okay. It's a real life journey, and we love doing real life. And I just honour you guys. Thank you so much for sharing. Why don't you stand with me this morning? We're going to finish up our service and continue to enjoy this beautiful day, the sunshine that's out there. We've got coffee hot and ready to go just for you. Make sure that you hang around and chat with somebody, catch up with somebody that maybe you haven't seen for a while. We'd love to just extend church beyond this auditorium as we head into the foyer. Team's going to take us out with a final song. Thanks, guys.